Hello, I'm Lynn Anderson at the University of West Georgia, where I teach French and cinema. Antoine et Colette is an early Truffaut film in a career that spans over 30 years. Truffaut created 21 films during his career and was known as a key director of the French New Wave. Key New Wave films include The 400 Blows by Truffaut, Hiroshima Mon Amour by Anna René, Breathless by Jean-Luc Godard, Cleo from 5 to 7 by Agnès Varda, and Jules Legime by Truffaut. The French New Wave was born during the late 1950s, early 1960s, and was composed of young writers and directors, low budgets, young actors shot on location, and had unconventional at the time use of sound and editing, but approaches that we now recognize as commonplace in contemporary cinema, advertising, and other media. Those elements include an accent on the visual versus the thematic, items that are filmed outdoors or in small interior spaces rather than expensive and artificial studios, sound recorded outdoors in real time, extended dialogues at times very long, improvised scripts and dialogues, abrupt changes in plot, shots of extended length, freeze frames, jump cuts, unstable framing, and background noise such as street noise or conversations that are allowed to remain in the soundscape of the film. Thematic elements include a critical distance between the viewer and the film, at times a commentary on cinema itself and the rapport between the director and the public, and at times a social or political critique. There are also more realistic portraits of the individual and an imperfect society. The films are often based on one's own lived experience, and there is the idea of the film director as author, or in French, auteur. The idea of the author or auteur as director came about in the Cahiers du Cinéma in the 1950s. It is the concept that the director provides their unique signature and vision to the film as elaborated by Truffaut and others in the French journal Cahiers du Cinéma. In a famous essay he writes, "The film of tomorrow thus seems to me to be even more personal than a novel, individual and autobiographical like a confession or an intimate diary." And he ends with the statement, "The film of tomorrow will be an act of love." And Truffaut's love of cinema is shown in his entire career of filmmaking. It's a love of cinema, a love of love itself, and also in this movie, Antoine et Colette, it's the love of music. For Antoine, as seen in this image, music is a structuring force in his personal, professional, and social life. This early scene shows Antoine framed between a poster for the Jeunesse Musicale on the left, that's the concert where he first sees Colette, and a poster of conductor Bruno Walter and composer Gustav Mahler on the right, clearly placing him under the sign of artistic creation in this film. Antoine is not only riveted by Colette at the concert, his emotions are underscored by the impassioned intensity of the symphony to which they're listening, Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. It was composed and performed by Berlioz for Harriet Smithson, who spurns his attention for many years. It created an uproar at the time and is famous for its passion, intensity, and for Berlioz's idée fixe, or fixed idea. For Berlioz, it was a musical theme that represents the beloved, a theme that he had recur in all 5 movements in different forms as he becomes more and more unhinged through the symphony. And the term itself, idée fixe, has come into the parlance to denote extreme obsession, whether amorous or otherwise. This idea of obsession in the idée fixe is something where there are parallels between Berlioz, Antoine, and Truffaut, and show how art and life intermix. Berlioz moves across the street from Harriet Smithson to spy on her in the early 1800s, not a great strategy for him. In the film, Antoine moves across the street from Colette to be closer to her, also does not work out for him. And then Truffaut himself, at age 18, He moves across the street from Liliane Litvin to be closer to her. Also not a good strategy. As he relates in an interview later, he says, "It happened exactly as I recounted it in L'amour à 20 ans. I fell in love with a girl I saw a lot, whom I met at film clubs. I was so smitten that I went to live opposite her, and believing that I was closer, I grew more distant from her. I saw her as much as I wanted, but for her I had become a kind of freeloading relative. In the end, it turned out so badly that I joined the army. At the time, the war in Indochina was taking place, and I enlisted for 3 years." But the drama doesn't end there for Truffaut's life. What Truffaut does not share in this interview is that he cut his wrists when the young woman, Liliane Litvin, did not return his love, then enlisted in the army, only to desert several times before being sent to military prison. Not a great strategy for Truffaut. Fortunately, these grave events do not befall Antoine. In fact, this film demonstrates Truffaut's view of the director as an auteur who conveys his unique vision by translating lived experience into cinema and by transforming misfortune into new possibilities. I hope this introduction has provided some helpful context in viewing this early Truffaut film as he brings to life his conviction: the film of tomorrow will be an act of love.